Hello and welcome to the Black Ponderer. I'm your host, Neil Trotter. Today we're going to be talking about some more political philosophy, and we're specifically going to be talking about a branch of political philosophy that many people view as a bit on the radical side, and that is anarchy or anarchism. And we're going to be talking about a political philosopher who has written a lot formerly about anarchism. I would say one of the innovators, one of the first establishers of anarchist thought, and that's Emma Goldman. And we're specifically going to be talking about Emma Goldman's essay, Anarchism, what it really stands for. So I've mentioned this before in several other previous videos. I'm from the San Francisco Bay Area, specifically Oakland, California. That's where I currently live. And that is a very politically active area. A lot of political activity goes down in the SF Bay Area, from the Occupy movement to the Black Lives Matter movement. Historically, this is the birthplace of the Black Panther Party. All types of political activity goes down here. And I mention this because anarchism to me is not a foreign concept to me. Like, I personally know hardcore anarchists, like people who really believe that government is unnecessary completely. They're actively engaged in trying to do away with the government. But despite that I personally know anarchists, I don't really know that much about the formal philosophy of anarchism. Interestingly enough, during my YouTube travels and subscriptions and interweb searchings, I came across this YouTuber called Literally Graphic. That's the name of her channel, and she does videos about comic books and graphic novels, but particularly focuses on indie comics. And she also does a lot of critical analysis on comics and graphic novels from a feminist point of view, which is very interesting. I recommend you check that out. Very interesting take on graphic novels and comic books. And one time she mentioned to me via comment, "Hey, Black Ponder, do you know who Emma Goldman is?" And I'm like, "No." And she said, "You should check her out because she has a lot of formal writing on the philosophy of anarchism." And I'm like, "Oh yeah, that's what I want to read about. I want to read about the philosophy of anarchism, the meaning behind anarchy. What does it really mean?" Because I know a lot of anarchists, but I'm not really savvy on the true philosophy of anarchism. And that's exactly what Emma Goldman's essay is. It is a strong breakdown of the philosophy behind anarchism. You got that stereotypical image of an anarchist, right? Dressed all in black. Maybe they got the black bandana tied over their mouth. They got the black spray paint, and they spray paint that A sign with the circle around it right on the wall as a graffiti, and they're like, yeah, after the establishment, that very stereotypical archetype, right? But when you read this essay, that archetype, that stereotype, just goes straight out the window, right? Emma Goldman makes a very strong case for anarchism. Very strong case. Now, after reading the essay, do I not believe in government anymore? No, I still think government is necessary for human beings to prosper. I still do believe that. But if I were to have a debate with Emma Goldman specifically, or a anarchist that's really savvy or hip with the philosophy behind anarchism, that would be a very intense conversation, because the philosophy of anarchism brings up some very, very good points and some huge flaws with government. And it's very hard to simply dismiss the points that anarchism has to say about society, because the philosophy does have some very strong points. Anarchism, real anarchism, focuses you to really think critically about our current state of government. And that's what I like about anarchism. It really forces you to think, is government really necessary? And your obvious answer is yes, but actually anarchism throws you some curveballs where you're like, is it really necessary? Let me read you this quote. How is the ordinary man to know that the most violent element in society is ignorance? That its power of destruction is the very thing anarchism is combating? It requires less mental effort to condemn than to think. The widespread mental indolence so prevalent in society proves this to be only too true. Rather than to go to the bottom of any given idea, to examine into its origin and meaning, most people will either condemn it altogether or rely on some superficial or prejudicial definition of non-essentials. Anarchism urges man to think, to investigate, to analyze every proposition. And I like that. I like that about anarchism. So what is the definition of anarchism? The philosophy of a new social order based on liberty, unrestricted by man-made law. The theory that all forms of government rest on violence and are therefore wrong and harmful, as well as unnecessary. Is this true? Well, let's delve into more of the philosophy behind this statement. I read you this quote. The individual and society have waged a relentless and bloody battle for ages, each striving for supremacy, because each was blind to the value and importance of the other. The individual and social instincts, the one a most potent factor for individual endeavor, for growth, aspiration, self-realization. The other, an equally potent factor for mutual healthfulness and social well-being. So point number one is that there is a conflict between the individual and the collective. Which is more important, the needs of the society or the needs of the individual? And anarchy says that the dominant way of thinking has it twisted because we put the needs of society over the needs of the individual. But however, both are equally important. In fact, by recognizing the importance of the individual and society, that is how we create a better world, a more beneficial world for everybody. The fact that we're downplaying our individual needs, or we're putting the individual subordinate of the collective, the society, that's what's causing destruction in our way of life. The primitive man, unable to understand his being, much less the unity of all life, felt himself absolutely dependent on blind hidden forces, ever ready to mock and taunt him. Out of that attitude grew the religious concepts of man as a mere speck of dust dependent on superior powers on high, who can only be appeased by complete surrender. All the early sagas rest on that idea, which continues to be the leitmotif of the biblical tales dealing with the relation of man to God, to the state, to society. Again and again, the same motif. Man is nothing. The powers are everything. The state, society, and moral laws are all sing the same refrain. Man can have all the glories of the earth, but he must not become conscious of himself. And that's very interesting because I just did a video on Thomas Hobbes' Leviathan. And that's basically the philosophy behind Leviathan. The philosophy is that at the end of the day, man as an individual cannot function on his or her own, woman included, and that the state is needed. So the individual gives up their power to rule themselves to the state or supreme being in the idea that this leader knows what's best for every individual rather than the individual themselves. And this concept stems from a religious point of view. And a lot of that philosophy, Hobbesian philosophy, is the very foundation of our current modern political society, a lot of modern government. And anarchism says that that philosophy is incorrect. Anarchism is the only philosophy which brings to man the consciousness of himself, which maintains that God, the state, and society are non-existent, that their promises are null and void, since they can be fulfilled only through man's subordination. So what is the result of this Hobbesian philosophy that has been dominant in our society? This is what anarchism has to say. Fatal is the crime of turning the producer into a mere particle of the machine, with less will and decision than his master of steel and iron. Man is being robbed not merely of the products of his labor, but of the power of free initiative, of originality and the interest in or desire for the things he is making. Real wealth consists in things of utility and beauty, and things that help to create strong, beautiful bodies and surroundings inspiring to live. But if man is doomed to wind cotton around a spool or dig coal or build roads for 30 years of his life, there could be no talk of wealth. What he gives to the world is only gray and hideous things, reflecting a dull and hideous existence, too weak to live, too cowardly to die. This is along the lines of Karl Marx's philosophy. The idea that man is caught up in the drudgery of work and that they kind of give up their creativity, their ability to realize their own individual potential. They give that up to realize the potential of the corporation. And the same is true about the state versus the citizen. In our current government, the individual gives up their individual potential. They give it up for the state to realize their true potential, and the individual value is lost. Order derived through submission and maintained by terror is not much of a safe guarantee. Yet that is the only order that governments have ever maintained. True social harmony grows naturally out of solidarity of interests. In a society where those who always work never have anything, while those who never work enjoy everything, solidarity of interest is non-existent. Hence, social harmony is but a myth. This is the concept of the Occupy movement, right? The idea that 99% of the population is only realizing the potential of 1% of the population. And the current economic and political environment is making this so. So long as most people are out of place doing the things they hate to do, living a life they loathe to live, crime will be inevitable. And all the laws on the statutes can only increase but never do away with crime. This is hearkening to the fact really that most people in life are doing jobs that they hate, right? They don't like, most people do not like their work. So this goes against the idea that government diminishes crime, but government is supporting institutions that foster this environment of people mostly making an income doing what they do not enjoy. Anarchism aims to strip labor of its deadening, dulling aspect, of its gloom and compulsion. It aims to make work an instrument of joy, of strength, of color, of real harmony, so that the poorest sort of a man should find work, both recreation and hope. To achieve such an arrangement of life, government with its unjust, arbitrary, repressive measures must be done away with. At best, it has but imposed one single mode of life upon all, without regard to individual and social variations and needs. In destroying government and statutory laws, anarchism proposes to rescue the self-respect and independence of the individual from all restraint and invasion by authority. Only in freedom can man grow to his full stature. Only in freedom will he learn to think and move and give the very best in him. Only in freedom will he realize the true force of the social bonds which knit men together, and which are the true foundation of normal social life. That right there is the goal of anarchism. A state of society where man is free to choose the mode of work, the conditions of work, and the freedom to work. One to whom the making of a table, the building of a house, or the tilling of the soil is what the painting is to the artist, and the discovery to the scientist the result of inspiration, of intense longing, and deep interest in work as a creative force. That being the ideal of anarchism. Its economic arrangements must consist of voluntary productive and distributive associations, gradually developing into free communism as the best means of producing with the least waste of human energy. Anarchism, however, also recognizes the right of the individual, or numbers of individuals to arrange at all times for other forms of work in harmony with their tastes and desires. And that's the ideal of anarchism. And that's actually been the theme of the Black Ponder, to be honest. One of the themes of this channel. This idea, this concept that everybody has a potential within them to contribute positively to society. Yet this is an individual potential and is rooted in a person's interests. What an individual finds rewarding, that can be built into something constructive. Yet our current society, the way it's structured, it pigeonholes people to do things that go against that potential, that interest, that inner desire that they have, which can be grown into something that could be used to contribute constructively for overall benefit. I do believe that that is what's happening in this world. And anarchism is saying that, you know what's doing that? Government is what's doing that. Government is crushing the individual potential and forcing people to just do what was necessary for the state to realize its potential. And the needs of the state aren't necessarily what help the needs of the individuals. So that's all fine and dandy, right? But I'm left with the question of, okay, so how are you going to implement anarchism? How do you go about carrying it forth? Right, you're throwing me all these ideals and these ideas and these concepts. Okay, now we got to start talking about implementation and execution. How are you going to go about doing it? How are you going to build a society without government? Aren't you just going to be left with chaos? I'm reading this, and then eventually it comes to the part where Emma Goldman does address this issue. As to the methods, anarchism is not, as some may suppose, a theory of the future to be realized through divine inspiration. It is a living force in the affairs of our life, constantly creating new conditions. The methods of anarchism, therefore, do not compromise an ironclad program to be carried out under all circumstances. Methods must grow out of the economic needs of each place and clime, and of the intellectual and temperamental requirements of the individual. So what Goldman is saying is that there is no uniform way of implementing anarchism, because anarchism is about addressing the needs of the individual. And each individual has different needs. Each individual can contribute to society in their own unique way. But for that to happen, that unique way has to be fostered. It has to be built up. It has to be supported. And that's different depending on each individual or set of individuals. Problem is, what we're doing now is, according to anarchism, is that we are implementing a form of rule that's uniform, and that's not conducive to all individuals. That's conducive to only a little select few individuals, or maybe even none at all. So uniformity is not the way to go. So to ask, okay, how are you going to implement it? Well, that depends. You have to actually sit down and think about it, because you have to really think about each individual case. And that's why government is not needed. Rather, rule based on collectives of individuals are needed. And those individuals will form their own ways of ruling, their own ways of realizing their potential to contribute to society in the way that's best for them. Uniform enforcement is against anarchism, because that crushes all the individual ways people can contribute. But of course, when you have uniformity, you have a way of easily controlling a society, right? It's very difficult to control a society that is not uniform, right? That doesn't abide by a single set of rules and regulations. It's hard for any one particular state or governing body to control a large amount of people or a large segment of society. Therefore, radical action is necessary for anarchy to be accomplished. Anarchism, therefore, stands for direct action, the open defiance of and resistance to all laws and restrictions, economic, social, and moral. But defiance and resistance are illegal. Therein lies the salvation of man. Everything illegal necessitates integrity, self-reliance, and courage. In short, it calls for free, independent spirits. So in that way, anarchism requires revolution for its goals to be implemented. That's why you see why it's viewed as a more radical branch of political philosophy. But I gotta tell you, Emma Goldman broke down anarchism in a easily digestible yet intellectual and hard to debate against way. Before you dismiss an anarchist, or before you dismiss the idea of anarchy, why don't you read some Emma Goldman, particularly this essay, and try to get an understanding of the philosophy behind anarchism. Because there's some really good ideas in there. Am I swayed completely to the point of view of anarchism? Do I believe government is unnecessary? Not quite. But now at least I can have an intelligent debate with an anarchist where I acknowledge the merits of their point of view. Because there are several merits to that point of view. And I open up the rest of that conversation to the comment sections below. Check out some Emma Goldman to understand the true philosophy behind anarchism. Anyway, you've been watching The Black Ponderer. Tune in next time for more philosophical thought.